The first time my parents told me to learn how to survive, I thought they were being dramatic. I didn't realize they meant without them. My name is Kristen Foster. I'm 29 years old. I'm a graphic designer living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and on paper, my life looks stable. I run a small but growing design studio. I pay my own mortgage. I have a husband who respects me, friends who feel like family, and a quiet home that finally feels safe. But 15 years ago, I was a 14-year-old girl standing on my parents' front porch in Raleigh, holding a single crumpled $100 bill, with no phone, no bag, and no idea where I was supposed to go. Back then, my name was Grace Lane, and everything I thought I knew about love shattered in less than 5 minutes. I can still hear the sound of my father's voice echoing through the house. Not yelling, he was past that. It was colder than yelling, controlled, final. You're not learning, you're not listening, and you're not our responsibility anymore. My mother stood behind him at the kitchen sink, arms crossed, nodding like this had been discussed and agreed upon long before I walked into the room. When the door slammed behind me and their car pulled away, tires screeching down the street, something inside me broke in a way I didn't have words for yet. I was 14, and I was completely alone. Growing up in Raleigh felt like living inside a carefully staged illusion. From the outside, my family looked like the kind people admired. My father, Wayne Lane, owned a local hardware store. He sponsored youth baseball teams. His name was printed on jerseys. People shook his hand at church and called him a pillar of the community. My mother, Elaine Lane, owned a bakery. Her pies showed up at every church fundraiser. Women complimented her patience, her kindness, her dedication to family. Our house had a white fence, trimmed hedges, and a porch swing that never squeaked on purpose. But inside that house, love was conditional, and silence was a weapon. My father believed in what he called tough love. What that really meant was control, fear, and punishment disguised as lessons. He drank most nights, not enough for people to notice, just enough for his temper to sharpen. My mother never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her approval was rare, and when she withdrew it, the air went cold. I learned very early that my job was not to need too much, speak too much, or take up too much space. I was 7 the first time I understood that something was wrong. We were at the grocery store. I asked for a candy bar while standing in the cereal aisle. My father stopped pushing the cart and stared at me like I had insulted him. "You're spoiled," he said. Then he walked away. He didn't look back. I stood there clutching my backpack while shoppers walked past me, glancing down with confusion and pity. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, waiting for someone to tell me what I'd done wrong. An hour later, my mother came to get me. She said it was to teach me gratitude. They laughed about it on the way home. I didn't. Moments like that stacked on top of each other, quietly shaping who I became. When I was 9, I spilled juice on the kitchen floor. My father grabbed my arm and dragged me into the backyard. He made me stand there for hours in the heat. "You'll learn to be careful," he said. My mother watched from the window. She never stepped outside. I had an older brother, Connor. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, athletic, loud in a way that was celebrated instead of punished. He played football. He brought home average grades. He broke rules and was rewarded for being a boy. I brought home straight A's. They asked why they weren't perfect. Connor got new cleats every season. I wore his old shoes, the soles peeling, the laces frayed. I didn't resent him. He tried, in the ways a kid could try. He snuck me snacks. He apologized with his eyes when Dad praised him and ignored me. But favoritism doesn't need cruelty to hurt. It just needs comparison. Art became my refuge. I'd lock myself in my room and draw until my fingers cramped. In my sketches, girls were brave, homes were warm, parents listened. Every harsh word, every cold silence became fuel. By 13, I lived in constant anxiety. I learned how to read footsteps, how to measure tone, how to disappear when necessary. One night, I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen. "She's too fragile," my father said. "We need to give her a real lesson." My mother agreed. I didn't know what that lesson would be. I just knew it was coming. The escalation didn't happen all at once. It never does. For my 11th birthday, they promised a trip to an amusement park. I talked about it for weeks. I imagined rides, cotton candy, laughter. Instead, they dropped me off at the gate, shoved $20 into my hand, and drove away. "Make it work," my dad said. I stood there, watching families walk past me, holding hands, buying tickets together. I bought a pretzel to stretch the money and wandered alone until my legs ached. When they came back hours later, my dad looked at my red eyes and shook his head. "Too weak," he said. My mother said it taught independence. There was no cake, no hug, no apology. Just another lesson. School became another battlefield. When I brought home a report card with 1 A-, my father exploded. "Why can't you be like Connor?" My mother stirred her tea and said nothing. Silence can be louder than shouting. By 14, the tension was constant. Everything I did felt like a test I was failing. And then one morning, it all broke. I was sitting at the kitchen table, picking at my cereal, praying for a quiet day. My father stormed in holding my report card. There was a C in science. He didn't ask why. He didn't listen. He told me I was throwing my life away. He told me I was useless. My mother agreed. When I tried to speak, he pointed to the door. "Get out." My mother handed me a $100 bill. "You need to learn," she said. And just like that, I was gone. Standing on the porch, the house behind me silent, the street empty, I made the only decision my 14-year-old brain could manage. I went south. Atlanta felt big enough to disappear in. That night, curled up near a closed shop, clutching my jacket, shaking with hunger and fear, I thought this was the end of my story. I didn't know it was the beginning. I didn't understand how loud silence could be until that first night in Atlanta. The city didn't sleep the way Raleigh did. Cars honked non-stop. Sirens cut through the dark. Groups of people moved past me like I was invisible, which somehow felt worse than being stared at. I was 14, sitting on cold concrete near a closed storefront, clutching my jacket like it was armor. I counted the money in my pocket over and over. $100. That was it. That was my entire safety net. I didn't know how long I stayed there. Time stopped feeling real when fear takes over. Every shadow looked like danger. Every stranger felt like a question I didn't want to answer. I didn't sleep. I barely breathed. And then, somehow, The universe cracked open just enough to let one familiar face through. Grace? I looked up so fast my neck hurt. It was Kristen Holt, a girl from my middle school. She was in Atlanta visiting her cousin. She froze when she saw me. Dirty sneakers, shaking hands, eyes swollen from crying. "What happened to you?" I tried to answer calmly. I failed. Everything poured out at once. My dad, my mom, the door, the money, the bus ride, the night on the street. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm and said, "We're telling someone right now." I was terrified. I thought if adults got involved, I'd be sent back. I thought being quiet was safer. But Kristen didn't give me that option. At the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. A man with tired eyes and a gentle voice introduced himself as Officer Juan Garcia. He listened. Really listened. When I told him my parents kicked me out, he didn't question it. He didn't minimize it. He didn't tell me they meant well. He said, "That's abandonment." Those 2 words changed everything. A woman named Nancy, who worked at the station, handed me water and a blanket. She didn't rush me. She didn't ask invasive questions. She just made sure I felt human again. That night, a caseworker from Child and Family Services, Diane Ramsey, arrived. She spoke softly, asked careful questions, told me they wouldn't call my parents right away. "For now," she said, "we're focused on keeping you safe." Safe. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that until I started crying again. By morning, I was placed with an emergency foster family, the Williamses. Their house was small, lived in, and unfamiliar. They had a daughter my age named Lily, who showed me her comic books like it was the most normal thing in the world to have a stranger sleeping in your guest room. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if my parents would come for me. Part of me hoped they wouldn't. When Diane called my parents the next day, I wasn't allowed to speak to them. She came back with tight lips and tired eyes. "Your father said they were teaching independence. Your mother agreed." I wasn't surprised. A family meeting was scheduled at the DCF office. I dreaded it. My stomach twisted for days leading up to it. Lily sat with me the night before and said, "You don't have to be brave. You just have to be honest." At the meeting, my parents sat across from me with an attorney. My father looked annoyed. My mother stared at the table. Their lawyer talked about discipline and values. I talked about standing alone with no phone and nowhere to go. The room didn't erupt. There was no dramatic shouting, just quiet. The kind of quiet that carries consequences. I refused to go back, and for the first time in my life, someone listened when I said no. The court granted temporary custody to the state. Over the next few months, my parents fought the decision half-heartedly, then stopped calling altogether. Eventually, they signed away their parental rights. I felt grief and relief. A few weeks later, I met Paul and Joan Foster in Charlotte. They weren't loud, they weren't impressive, they didn't make promises. Paul was an art teacher, Joan was a pediatric nurse. Their house smelled like laundry detergent and pasta sauce. They asked what I liked. They didn't ask what I'd done wrong. They gave me my own room, painted blue. When the adoption finalized before my 15th birthday, They asked if I wanted to change my name. I chose Kristen Foster, not because I hated who I was, but because I wanted space between who I'd been forced to be and who I was becoming. High school was hard. Trust didn't come naturally. I worked constantly, school, chores, art, because rest still felt dangerous. Paul noticed my sketches and set up a small art corner just for me. "You don't have to earn being here," he said once. I didn't believe him right away. Therapy came next. Dr. Clara Stein helped me put words to what I'd lived through: PTSD, hypervigilance, emotional neglect. She taught me that being strong wasn't the same as being silent. Slowly, I learned how to breathe without bracing for impact. My brother Connor showed up once, years later. He apologized, said he should have protected me. I listened. I didn't forgive him, but I didn't hate him either. Life moved forward. College, graphic design, late nights proving myself. Not because anyone asked, but because I didn't know how to stop. I became the woman who never said no. The woman who carried everything. The woman people relied on. And I thought that meant I was healed. I was wrong. Because 15 years after my parents left me with $100, they came back. By the time my phone started lighting up with missed calls from a Raleigh area code, I had already built a life that looked nothing like the one I came from. I was 29, married, running my own design studio in Charlotte. My calendar was always full. Client meetings, deadlines, volunteer projects for nonprofits I believed in. I was exhausted, in that familiar way women call productive. I told myself I was happy. So when I saw that Raleigh number pop up again and again, my first instinct wasn't curiosity. It was dread. I ignored the calls for 2 days. Then the voicemail came through. It was Connor. His voice sounded different, older, heavier. "Kristen, Dad had a heart attack. It's bad. They found you through your business website. Mom wants to talk to you." There it was. The reason. Not an apology. Not accountability. A crisis. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen long after the call ended. My chest felt tight, like 14-year-old me was standing on that porch again, waiting to be told what I owed. I didn't want to go, but I wanted closure. Dr. Stein helped me prepare. She reminded me that seeing them didn't obligate me to fix anything. "Going back doesn't mean going backward," she said. "And boundaries are still boundaries, even when people are sick." I agreed to meet Connor first, neutral ground, a coffee shop in Raleigh. He looked worn down, older than his years. He told me everything. Dad's drinking had gotten worse after I left. The hardware store failed. People stopped supporting them once rumors of what they'd done spread. Mom never recovered socially. Church friends disappeared. I listened quietly, not because I felt guilty, but because their downfall wasn't my responsibility. Connor hesitated before saying what he'd come to say.
"They're struggling. Medical bills. They were hoping maybe you could help."
There it was again, the unspoken expectation. I didn't answer him right away. Later that afternoon, with Dr. Stein sitting beside me, I walked into the hospital. My father looked small in that bed, frail. Not the man who towered over me when I was 14. My mother sat next to him, hands folded, eyes tired. They both looked at me like relief had walked through the door. "We're so glad you came," my mother said. My father's voice was weak.
We never wanted things to turn out this way.
They didn't say they were sorry. They asked for help. Financial help, medical bills, housing, stability. I felt something inside me finally go still. 14-year-old me didn't get help. She got $100. I spoke calmly. You left me with nothing. I survived because strangers stepped in. I don't owe you anything. My mother cried. My father protested. Dr. Stein squeezed my hand, and I stood up. Walking out of that hospital didn't feel dramatic. It felt clean. Outside, the air was cool. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. Because for the first time, I chose myself without apology. And that choice changed everything. I thought walking out of that hospital would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part came later, when the guilt tried to crawl back in wearing a familiar voice. In the weeks after I returned to Charlotte, the messages started. Emails from unfamiliar addresses, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, a letter forwarded from an old Raleigh address, handwritten, careful, emotional. My mother wrote about regret without using the word sorry. My father wrote about fear without acknowledging harm. They framed it as reconciliation. I recognized it for what it was: pressure. Dr. Stein helped me see the pattern clearly. When I was a child, love had always been transactional. Approval followed obedience. Safety followed silence. Now, as an adult, they were offering closeness in exchange for rescue. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a plan. Not a revenge plan, a boundary plan. I met with a lawyer to make sure my parents had no legal leverage, no claim, no obligation, no loopholes. I updated my will. I blocked remaining channels of contact. I told Connor, calmly and firmly, that I wouldn't be involved financially or emotionally. I'm not abandoning them, I said. I'm choosing myself. And for the first time, I believed it. The consequences came quietly. Medical bills swallowed what little savings Wayne and Elaine had left. They sold the house with the white fence, moved into a small apartment far from the neighborhood where they'd once been admired. The community that once praised them stayed silent. No one came to rescue them. Not because I spoke out, but because truth eventually surfaces on its own. Meanwhile, my life didn't explode into fireworks. It stabilized, and that felt better. My studio grew steadily, not overnight success, real growth, sustainable contracts, clients who respected my time. I stopped underpricing my work, stopped apologizing for deadlines. I learned how to say no without explaining myself. At home, my marriage deepened. Michael noticed the shift before I did. "You're lighter," he said one night. "Like you're not carrying ghosts anymore." I still worked hard. That part of me didn't disappear. But I stopped working from fear. Paul and Joan, my real parents, never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. They didn't push forgiveness. They didn't pressure healing. They just stayed. One afternoon, I stood in my studio, sunlight spilling across the floor, and realized something quietly monumental. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. I thought about the 14-year-old girl on that porch in Raleigh, about the woman she became because she had to be strong too early. And I wished I could tell her this. You were never broken. You were never too much. And walking away didn't make you heartless. It made you whole. If you're watching this and you feel tired all the time, if you're the one everyone relies on but no one protects, if your family only reaches out when they need something, hear me clearly. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't include people who hurt you. Healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance. And sometimes distance is the most loving choice you'll ever make for yourself.